Okay, and in 1 minute we will go live here. Or less than a minute. So we'll get
Okay,
things going here.
it's exciting. All right. Okay.
Well, hello. I am really excited today. I'm looking forward to learning today from Abby. Abby Vincent is with us today. This is Life's Co-Pilot, and we are always trying to bring you information that you can use. Um, Abby is you're with Joy's house, but you are
That's right.
a end of life doula. Okay, and I don't know if a
Hmm.
lot of people even know that such a thing exists. I'm not sure how many people even know about birthing doulas, but there's
Right, right.
that's
Yeah.
in there. So very excited about getting you here to have you explain to us what it is a doula does,
Hmm.
what an end of life doula is,
Hmm.
what the process, basically let's get us educated. We don't know much of anything. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you explain some of this stuff. Abby Vincent with Joy's House.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for having me on your program today. I'm super excited to be here and talk with all of you, answer any questions, and just kind of share some information. My background, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've worked in the mental health field for years, and now am full-time at Joy's House, working as a social worker and an end-of-life doula. And I want to tell you today specifically about an end of life doula and what that. Some people may not have heard of an end of life doula before. Um, and so, what some people also refer to an end of life doula as a death doula. It's the names are the same, or it means the same thing. So, what I want you to think about for end of life doula, the meaning behind it, it also so some of you may have heard of a birth doula. So it's somebody that helps with all the non-medical parts of when a woman gives birth to a child. An end of life doula is the same, as except it's on the other end of life. Obviously, birth and death. There are a lot of similarities between the birth and the death process that we don't really think a lot about. But a death doula, end of life doula, is somebody who walks with that person through all of the non-medical parts of facing the end of life. So sometimes we will work with people who have received a terminal diagnosis and they know that they will be facing death sooner than later. Sometimes we can work with people who just know that at some point they will die and they want to make sure all of their wishes are followed, everything's planned out for the end of their life, and helping them maybe think about and consider things that they haven't thought much about before. It's also that emotional support. That is a big piece of what we do, is providing emotional support to the dying individual and then also to the family. So that's kind of the short version of it.
Okay.
I have some slides I'll share with you that will go into a little bit of the longer version of it, that can help people understand a little bit better.
I was going to ask you about that if it was
Mhm.
always with the individual that is heading towards passing, or is it with the family that you're really
Mhm.
working with, or is it a combination thereof? So
Yeah, it's a combination. So ideally, it starts with the dying individual who is able to communicate their wishes, able to talk through their healthcare representative uh, forms, their advanced directives, review all of that, um, do some. We have different options available when we're working with individuals. We can do things like a life review, which is really beneficial for some people to get that information written down, maybe done through a video presentation. There's all kinds of creative ways to create things that the person can leave for their family. But eventually, it also ends up working with the family as well. And sometimes that might mean having some hard conversations that the individual isn't sure how to have with their family. They're not sure, their family's having a really hard time accepting things and being able to talk through things. And so part of that might be facilitating those conversations with the family. So our client is the individual. We also end up working with the family. So yeah,
Do
it's
you
kind of
find
both.
your
Depends on the situation too.
how do people reach? I mean, what do they, where do you normally find people reaching out to you? Is it, are they being referred through this? Are people
Mm-hmm.
seeking it? Or do enough people even know to even look? Or, I mean, I'm trying to figure out kind of how that is working in the world out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're in the beginning stages of it. There are more end of life doulas on the East and West Coast in the U.S. than there are in the Midwest. But it's picking up some traction. And what the organization that we did a lot of our education and training through is called the National End of Life Doula Alliance, and you can find that online, and it has all of the end of life doulas that are proficient through the National End of Life Doula Alliance online that you can see. So I think we're in those stages of providing some education to people about end of life doulas and the benefit that can be found in working with a doula, which is, another reason I'm happy to be on this show today, just to kind of share the story. And that is something that we're also working on at Joy's House. Our end of life services have three components, and one is community education. So, and helping people have hard conversations around death and dying. So there's three components of our end of life work here. One being the individual work with people. Part of our education efforts have been with attorneys, with hospice agencies, with other senior care programs to provide them with information about an end of life doula and what benefit that can bring. And then the second component of our end of life services at Joy's House are building an end of life doula alliance among other professionals in Indiana to bring people together, to support each other, and then also bring those conversations out into the community. And then our third objective is hosting community events to help people talk about and have a space to talk about death and dying. One of our most recent events was our Death Over Drafts, drafts meaning draft beer. And we held it at, our most recent one was at Kismetic Beer Company, and we invited the community to help create a space to have conversations and help people feel more comfortable in talking about death and dying. So there's the individual end of life doula services, the alliance of professionals, and then the community conversations are kind of our three components of our program. Specifically, the individual services, you asked the question about just referrals. How do we get the word out? How do people know about it? It's kind of through all those avenues. Lots of conversations and opportunities for education about how a doula can work with somebody. And Joy's House, we have 3 trained end of life doulas at Joy's House for that individual work with people. So yeah, hopefully, does that explain it a
Yes,
little
it
bit
did.
better?
I'm sorry, I had to pull something out of my dog's mouth that's laying at my feet here before he choked on it, and I needed you to come and I'll talk to him. But anyway, what I wanted to,
Yeah, you never know with dogs.
I know, I saw what he was doing, like, oh my God. But anyway, um, so what I was
Oh,
going
you're
to
like,
ask her
no,
was,
no.
yeah, I was just wanting to talk to you about one thing too. I can't imagine, or I can imagine that there's a great deal of stigma involved in having the conversation with you to begin with. I know that dealing with hospice companies, families and people are like so
Mhm.
reluctant to take advantage of all the services that are provided there, and they have no idea really what all the services that hospice could bring to
Mhm.
someone. and they're reluctant because they're afraid of the word. So how do you overcome that?
Hmm.
I mean, it has to even be worse.
Yeah, that's a oh yeah, it's a big issue. It really is because we have found since starting the end of life program at Joy's house, when we bring it up, there are some people who are like, "Oh, tell me more about that." And they really lean in and they want to have a conversation about it. And other people are like, no thanks. Stop right there. I gotta go now, kind of thing. There's a lot of fear around talking about death. And so and it's hard, right? It's hard. We don't want to think about it. We don't want to imagine losing our loved ones. It's a really, really tough thing. And so, Jim, that's one of the reasons that we're forming the alliance to bring together professionals to bring the message out more, find spaces for people to feel comfortable. And another reason we're doing some of the community events, just to create that opportunity even when it's tough. And, I'll tell you, feedback from people who have come to the Death Over Drafts events that we've had several people who have been like, I did not want to come. My husband made me come. My friend really wanted me to come and she kind of drug me along. And they have left with a smile on their face and a sense of relief almost to have an opportunity to talk about it. Because when we talk about death and dying, what we're really talking about is how we want to live today. And people have really engaged in those conversations. So hopefully through all three of these approaches, we're kind of planting that seed with people that it's okay to talk about and it's actually good to talk about and plan for the future. And so, yeah, but I mean, you're not wrong about that. It's a tough subject, and some people don't want to have anything to do with it. And I understand that. I really do.
Well, I think people think that they feel like they're giving up or they're admitting something they don't want to admit
Yeah.
or what have you.
Yep.
And the other
Yep.
thing though is, as you made the comment that they come to these things and they come away with a totally different perspective. I think that
Mhm.
almost all things, the fear goes down the more you know.
100%. You are 100% right about that. And that's something we talk with people about, that the more information, the more knowledge you have, the less anxious and fearful you will feel. It's really true. It really is true.
Because your
So yeah,
imagination can do some amazing things when you're trying to run wild with all the
right.
things. Yeah. So yeah.
It can lead us to some really, really tough places. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a
Yeah.
tendency to, I've
Yeah.
always heard, I had a mentor of mine one tell me that, that worry is faith in a negative outcome.
Mm. Hmm.
So you
Yeah.
have faith, but you're
Oh,
not
that's
having.
interesting. I'm letting that sink in just a little bit. Yeah. Huh.
so so
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So
Well, and one thing, kind of another point to that question that you asked, there are some really valid reasons for talking about death and dying and planning things out and making sure that you have discussed your wishes with your family. One really important reason is that if something tragic were to happen to me or to you or to any of our family members, if we've had those conversations previously, then I know what my mom wants, or I know what my sister wants at the end of life. And it can relieve some burden from the decision makers when you have had those discussions with your family. And that's a really important point about having these conversations as well, is relieving that burden from our family. So
well, that's one of the things that I was going to say. We had an experience with my mother-in-law, and uh, in that particular case, she had a DNR. Okay, and then she'd had a heart attack,
mhm,
and she was not conscious. And so the decision fell into my wife, who was the only living relative she had
mhm,
as far as that goes. And so she was to deal with this. And we knew the advanced directive, a DNR, but then the doctors we couldn't get the doctors or the nurses to give us any kind of an insight whether, it's like we don't want to say no, just say no
Yeah.
if we think that there's a
Mhm.
way of bringing, of keeping her alive and not getting stuck on a vent or whatever it is, give us some guidance. And they absolutely refused to give us guidance. And so you had to make that decision anyway. And I think the more conversations you have previously, the better.
100%. Yes, that's absolutely right. And some of the yeah, gosh, and that's a tough experience with your family member, with your family too, Jim. So um the more conversations you have and the more you talk about it and the more you write things down, and there are advanced directives out there that that have prompting questions, um, that can lead to some really good, meaningful conversation with our family. And then, then you find yourself in a position where you're like, oh, yeah, remember when mom told me about if this happened, this is what she would want. So you have those conversations and those things to go back to, at least to help with help with that decision making. So yeah, but thanks for sharing your story. Yeah.
But the more you have, more information you have, the more power you have, because otherwise you're always second guessing yourself.
Hmm.
I think you
Absolutely.
probably
Yeah.
second guess yourself to a degree anyway, but
Yeah, exactly. Because everything's so complicated. It never like plays out perfectly how we want it to, right?
yeah.
And so that's why, and when we bring up conversations with individuals and families, these aren't conversations to have one time and then you close the book on it. So it's starting conversations, and that can lead to more conversations and just an in-depth and uh, closeness that can happen among families or friends or caregivers, whoever it is, as you continue those conversations in the future. They're really valuable.
Well, explain to me
Yeah.
what the relationship is between the doula and the person, whatever. From you're going in, kind of
Mhm.
give me a an idea. Walk me through a process with a family, I guess.
Mhm. Some
Yeah,
scenarios
from the
maybe.
beginning to the end. How does that
Yeah.
relationship work?
Yeah. So what we do initially is if somebody called Joy's house interested in talking with an end of life doula, we would have a phone conversation, and I would myself or one of our other doulas would explain the process to that person. Um, and it could be different depending on where that person's at, whether they have already have a terminal diagnosis or whether they just to do some planning because they know at some point they're getting older, they're thinking about planning out the rest of their life. So we would have a conversation. If it's right for you, then we would set up that initial assessment, initial meeting, and that can be in that person's home. It can be here, set whatever location that person is interested in. And that visit would usually be about an hour and a half. We found that, much longer than that, it's kind of too much. So we usually set that visit for about an hour and a half. We would go through some history, some different questions, and then we would talk about what that person's goals are for working with an end of life doula. And so I'll tell you just some basic scenarios. It kind of depends on where somebody's at in the dying process. So if somebody's pretty early and they know that they want to do some legacy projects, so it might be working with the doula to create some ways for their legacy to live on with their friends and family, and that can be a whole range of activities. We have a lot of ideas we can present to an individual, or they might have an idea of something they already want to do, but they need help with that. That might be going through all of their documentation, their advanced directives, making sure those are all in order. And if we get to a point where it's not something we can serve that person regarding all the documentation for end of life, we would refer them to one of the elder law attorneys that we are in touch with. So if it's above our scope of practice, we would refer that person out. But we can work with an individual to complete their healthcare representative forms and other forms that can be done without an attorney. So that might be really what they would like to accomplish. And also organizing all of their paperwork. There are a lot of things that happen when a person dies, and many of you who have gone through this experience with a family member, regarding like life insurance and bank accounts and all of that. So it might be sitting down and going through all of that, like logistical stuff that needs to happen. And so we would really talk through that process of what a person wants to get out of working with an end of life doula, what their goals are. It might also be, and this is with one particular person I worked with, she was pretty far along in the dying process. So a lot of the work was with her family member. Family member was having, just as you might imagine, a really, really difficult time with her sibling's death, and as she moved closer to dying, helping her find some ways to cope with sitting bedside with her family member, helping her do some anxiety reducing strategies, and being present with her in those times to really help her feel safe and comfortable. So it might mean sitting vigil with somebody as they move closer to death, providing support to the family. So that initial visit with that individual is really important to meet them where they are and set goals for our time together. And then after that, it would depend on whatever goals we wanted to accomplish, that person wanted to accomplish. That might mean we would set 4 visits. We think that we can accomplish these particular things in 4 visits. So we would set up those visits to happen. And if that person wants support planning their vigil, being present when that person moves closer to dying, then we would talk about what that looked like also. Who do they want to be there? What kind of music do they want playing? If they want music, what kind of sounds do they want happening around them? And so that would be part of it also. And a lot of people ask too, just what's the difference between an end of life doula and working with hospice? And so it is different. Our hope is that we get to people prior to going on hospice and then can refer them to hospice quicker. Sometimes people don't find out about or get enrolled with hospice early enough. And so,
Sometimes or almost all the time.
so a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah. And so one of our goals is to help people find those services and that support earlier. Now that doesn't always happen. So an end of life doula can work in conjunction with hospice. It's like an extra person, an extra support in addition to the care that they get from hospice. Because again, end of life doula is non-medical, and hospice treats the medical side of things also. So, but we can work in conjunction as an extra layer of support for that individual and the family.
I think that this was very interesting, this last little part of the conversation here, because I think in my mind's eye, what I thought, I had this vision that basically it was, and you said that this was possible, is that end of life, bedside moment is what I thought the doula was doing. What I'm hearing you say, okay, that my brain is almost like a geriatric care manager, but rather than a care manager for following through the medical process, but following through like the organizational process, the planning process. I never really considered that was part of what this was.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I just had something come to mind, Jim, when you were saying that. When you think about those of you who are familiar with birth doulas start working with a pregnant person, or they hope to, early on in their pregnancy, to pre-plan, to think about and prepare for what that birth process will be like. It's kind of the same with an end of life doula, because dying is a process, and a person, as they reach the end of their life, go through similar the labor of dying. And so part of it is helping to prepare that individual and family for that process. So yeah.
Well, like I
Yep.
said,
But it's
I never, I basically had this image of, this
yeah.
bedside thing,
Yep.
and that, so,
And it can be that. It can be that for sure. Yeah. It just also can be a lot more in the preparation and having those conversations and providing information and knowledge and helping people have conversations with their family. So it can be all of that.
well, I can see, as I've often wondered how, if you're waiting till close to the end to create a relationship with a doula, it would
Hmm.
seem to me be very hard to ingratiate into the family and into the emotional
Hmm.
side of the family and
Oh
the
yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're telling me is that if you start way early,
Hmm.
then you're already there. You know,
Right. That's right.
it I think of, we have she calls herself a Renadaughter, but
I
we
love
have
it.
some what she's a nurse advocate, and she does both home care and health, type things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I have a relationship with her, with both my mom and my uncle, and
Perfect.
which otherwise I'd never be able to go to work because, one of them's always got something going on, right?
Yeah. That's right.
And she is, she's a godsend on that, but she's family at this point. I
Mhm.
mean, there's no ifs, ands,
Mhm.
or buts. In fact, I think both of them prefer her to any of us. But anyway, so, she's a doll. But she's been with us for years.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
mean, I can definitely see things are making a little more sense to me now, I think, than they
Hmm.
did. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I agree with you. It's tough to come in at the end of a person's life and for people to feel safe and comfortable and um for that relationship to strengthen. It's tough when that happens, and it does sometimes. It's much you can build that relationship over time and gain trust and comfort and all of those important qualities if we start earlier. So yeah, that's always our hope, to get to work with people earlier rather than later. Yeah.
The other question I was going to have, this is more of a personal one. It's just, the same thing with like someone that's in hospice and something. I would think it would be an emotional toll on the person in that role. So
Mm.
there, that,
Hmm.
I'm sure you have to have some way of dealing and coping, with all those things as well. So.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. And part of that is, having our coworker unit of other doulas to just talk with and offer support. And I gain so much from the relationships that I form with families, and it's a really special place to be with people. And I, in so many experiences, it is such an honor to be, for me personally, to be a part of people's lives at the end of their lives. There's so much richness and value in what happens among with individuals and families, and I gain a lot of energy from this type of work. And at the same time, it is hard because we're talking about death and we're seeing people go through so much hardship, and so we have to take care of ourselves, and that's a big part of it too. Having colleagues that are supportive and having our own means of self-care. It's really true. Yeah.
Well, years ago, I had a mentor that he specialized in ministering to ministers, to pastors.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And he was always talking about how they were the most vulnerable for collapse, because they were constantly giving out but not taking in.
Yeah.
And and then I don't remember if this was his quote or someone else's quote that I equate with it. It's like you can't load, I'm a farm background. You can't load an empty wagon from an empty wagon. You have to
Yeah,
make sure to
that's
fill the
right.
first wagon up first, or you can't
Yep.
do it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. You got to make sure your own bucket's full when you're caring for other people. Yeah. What is it? The put on your oxygen mask first, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Yeah. It really, that's so true. It really is.
And that would go
Mhm.
for any caregiver or whatever, family caregiver or what have you,
Mhm.
throughout the whole
Oh,
process.
oh yeah. It's the same at Joy's house with our other services, our
Mhm.
adult day and our other caregiver support services. It really is the same that, caregivers, boy, they're pretty amazing people, and it's a really tough job. So helping them find ways to care for themselves, that's important too. Yeah.
So you say you had some slides you want to share with us. I was going to let you go do that. At the bottom of your screen, there's a little green button that says share screen,
Oh yeah.
and you can
Yeah.
do it right there if you like. So,
Okay. Some of this, Jim, I have just ended up just talking about.
well,
So
that's fine, but sometimes when
yeah.
people see
I,
something visually too,
yeah,
we
I
can
want to
get.
run. I want to show you this. Let me go. I want to show you this slide. This kind of helps. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
This just has kind of what I explained, our end of life doula services, the Indiana End of Life Alliance, and then community events. But I wanted to share, and I mentioned this as well, when we talk about death and dying, we're really talking about how we want to live, which kind of helps you think about it a little in a little bit different terms. So I find that to be a helpful thought. I love this quote. It sounds like you like quotes, Jim.
I do.
So yeah. So this is part of what we talk with an individual and a family about when we first meet them. Part of our role as a doula is to help you decide and process and talk through, what must I do to be at peace with myself so I may live presently and die gracefully. So that's something that is really important to us to share with others and to help them find that. What is it that will bring them peace to be able to live presently and die gracefully?
Well,
So
that's quite a comment, because how many people are living presently in any time of their lives, you know,
right.
and that is such a
Mm-hmm.
key to anything.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Being
it
where you
is.
are when you are there, not, you
That's
know,
right. That's
I've
right.
always coached people as like, if you're, people are always at home when they're at work because they're worried about something at home, or they're at work when they're at home. I'm like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
be where you
Right.
are.
Yes, that's right. Be where you are. That's right. And I'll tell you that something that has happened for me personally and for other people in this field that I know and people I've worked with is that when we think about death and we talk through and we identify these things that we want to do or things that we want to accomplish, it has really helped me personally to live with gratitude and intention. And I think about those things a lot, and they have helped me form how I want to move forward. And so, hopefully, these conversations and this work with people as an end of life doula, and some of the conversations that we've had at like Death Over Drafts, I'm hopefully that is spreading to other people too. And I know it is, at least with a lot of the folks that I've spoken with. So, um, we already kind of talked a little bit about this, but this is just good to know too. When talking about death and dying is kind of a daunting task, that there are some really good reasons to do it. We talked about how it's less likely to burden our relatives when there are tough medical decisions. We already kind of went over that. We're more likely to misrepresent our relatives' wishes when there's a crisis if we have not discussed end of life wishes. And that's another. It's kind of a the opposite of what I just mentioned, but we we do want to represent our relatives' wishes well, and we want to do what they want. And so, of course, we're more likely to misrepresent it if we haven't talked about it. Just that there is life-giving conversations when we talk about death. It helps us feel connected to others, and it breaks down feelings of fear. We kind of touched on that a little bit too, Jim. and that sometimes people feel relief when they have a comfortable, safe space to talk about death. I've already mentioned that a couple times. We're really talking about how we want to live. We already went through all of this. These are just some of the options that we talk with an individual and families about when we first meet with them, to really go over what their goals are and what they'd like to accomplish. And this also just defines the role of an end of life doula. You can find all this information on the National End of Life Doula
Do,
Alliance.
do you work with like funeral uh
Funeral homes and
planners?
funeral
Yeah,
planning,
yeah,
or
to like do the pre-planning and all that kind of stuff with that, or
yeah, we can offer some of that information, and then we would refer them to a funeral home if they want to pursue some of that.
okay.
But we do go through and make sure they've identified what their wishes are, what funeral home they want contacted, all of those specifics.
Well, I
Yeah.
just, our family has always in the past, we always wait until crisis mode to do things on the fly.
Yeah.
And we're really good at that. We've been
Yeah.
doing it over and over and over again. But we just, I'm the POA guardian and trustee of both two relatives right now.
Okay.
And one of them, we were doing some work to get into Medicaid waiver. So we had to get rid of his insurance policies
Yep.
to qualify. So we cashed them out and then did a pre-plan. So that was the first time I've gone through that process. And
Yep.
I will tell you, it's actually kind of comforting to know that, when the time comes, it's just basically pulling this folder out and making a phone call.
It's done and figured out, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
So
because
I just
again,
heard you,
like
Jim. I
our
just heard
normal
you say
routine
that your
is
family.
our normal routine is being subject to having people trying to upsell us everything because we're emotionally distraught, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Well, and I love how you just said, your family, like, you're really great at at leaving things until it's crisis mode. And it sounds like the opposite has happened in this situation. So like that's
yeah,
organized, worked out, and that it feels good.
yeah, it
It
does.
feels good. Yeah. Yep. So that's you just illustrated my point exactly. So let me see. This just has my contact information and phone number and a book recommendation. If you just want a little bit of perspective on it, and it's a great book. It's had a impact on me, and I know a lot of other people that have read it. I also want to share. I didn't put this on my slide, and a lot of hospice organizations use this as well. This book, can you see that? Okay.
No, why don't you quit sharing and then you will see
Okay.
that.
Let me quit
Right
sharing
now
here.
your little tiny screen.
Yep. Yep. There we go.
There
Okay.
we go.
Yeah. This book is called Gone From My Sight. It is written by a woman named Barbara Carnes. She's been a hospice nurse for like 30 plus years. She's incredible in her education and information that she shares with people. This is a tiny little blue book. It's really small. If you can see that, it has large print. And this has had a real impact on people who are with their loved ones at the end of life. She goes through and essentially details what to expect. So again, that idea that you mentioned early on in our conversation, Jim, about knowledge decreases fear and anxiety, and having this information is so useful because your loved one could be really extremely restless and agitated, and you're like, what is going on? We can't, that nothing is helping. And then if you have some of this information that she shares, you're like, oh, this is what happens. This is what we should be expecting, where they're having changes in their breathing patterns or changes in the color of their skin. And again, if you have this information handy right by the bed, you know that this is what we should be expecting. Some families have even shared this with loved ones who come to visit, because we don't if somebody hasn't seen that person in a long time, that they're going to go through some shock and not some lack of understanding. So it can just be really helpful. I just wanted to point that out if anybody is interested in something like that.
Well, excellent. Well, I will tell you that that being mortal,
Hmm.
I just had somebody refer that to me just yesterday. So
Oh, really?
yeah, first time I had heard of
Yeah.
it. So that
Yeah.
was that was
It's an excellent book. We could come back later and do a discussion on that book alone, Jim, but they also do, he has it in an
maybe we
audio.
should. I will put you on there if you want to do
There,
that. So yeah.
there we go. That'd be great. He has an audiobook too where the author reads it. So it's anyway, it's a great book to really gain some perspective on aging and what matters in the end. Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, I'm very excited. I think you did a great job. I'm really glad to get this information out because, frankly, there was a whole lot of this I didn't know. I didn't,
Okay.
I had
Great.
in my own head what I thought it might be, but
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I imagine a lot of people are in that same boat.
Good.
So I will. What we'll do is we'll make a copy of this video. I'll get it to you. You can use it however you want to. It will
Okay.
also be on Life's Copilot.
Hmm.
Enter our video library resources. And I
Hmm.
also wanted to let people know that on March 19th, we have another one coming up, Julie Barnes, and we at 6 p.m., 6 to 7 p.m. ish. Julie Barnes with Prime Life Enrichment will be talking about all the different activities and senior resources and stuff that'll be available to seniors in Carmel, right there, basically
Great.
Carmel. So that's the
Yeah.
next. We do these twice a month. So we have Tuesday, we have a Thursday noon and a Tuesday at 6. So we do these twice a month.
Perfect.
Just to give you some information. And there's a whole library of these. So I will get this to you. Is there anything that you haven't had a chance to say that you really want people to hear because people just don't get it and you want to try to go
Mm.
shake them by the lapels and go, "Would you listen?"
Hmm. I guess I guess the only thing is to think about being open to the conversation and the value that can bring to your own life and to the life of your loved ones around you. So I guess it's just that, just consider being open to the conversation. Yeah.
Well, I have one other question that I want to ask, okay?
Okay.
Because I didn't, and I would like to know what in the world got you into this?
Oh, I love that. I have always been, since I was young, been drawn to working with seniors. I've worked as a therapist with older adults in nursing homes and assisted living, and I love being with people at the end of their life. I don't know what it is. It's, I get around other people who are in a similar profession. And we're like, we're drawn to it, to helping people through the end of their life and helping people maintain dignity and making sure their wishes are carried out. Like it is, I don't know. I love it. I love working with people in that capacity. And I always, it's just been something I've always been interested in. So I don't know. It feels kind of strange to say that, but that's it.
Well, I actually get it more than you think, but it's like because I have a hobby that I'm over the moon on. I'm a beekeeper,
Oh,
and
you are.
And so other beekeepers and us,
Yep.
we all go, there's got to be something wrong with us because
Yeah,
we like to have thousands upon thousands of stinging insects in our yard, but
exactly. Okay, so it's the same thing about people who work in death and the death and dying fields. Like,
yeah,
what is it about me that that I really enjoy this work? I really
yeah.
enjoy it. So I
Well,
don't know.
thank you so much for coming. I
Thank,
really appreciate it.
thank you for having me, Jim.
And I'm going to take you up on that book thing.
Yeah, let's do it. That would be
Okay.
great.
Talk
Okay.
to you later.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye.